Let's give folks just a couple more minutes to see if we can get a critical mass here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Why don't we go ahead and get going, and hopefully a few additional folks will join us en route here, so to speak. So I'd like to go ahead and call today's TPCC meeting of June 21st to order. And to begin with, Bella, are you out there?
It's Ashley filling in for Bella, but okay. I'm here.
Ashley, would you do us the favor of doing roll call for us?
Sure. Mirta Becerra.
Present.
Mayor Ingen.
Mike Nugent, are you filling in for the mayor?
Yep, I'm sitting in today for Jordan for the mayor. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Don MacArthur. Debbie Johnston.
Here.
Lucia Olvera.
This is Ryan Hammond here for Lucia.
Okay. Josh Slotnick. Dave Strohmeyer.
Here.
Bob Vosen. Tung Pham. Okay, thank you.
All right. Sadly, I think we are lacking a quorum if my count is correct. So we'll hold any items that need action until we get that critical mass arriving here. So we'll hold the minutes for now from April 19th, see if we can get approval on those before we adjourn today. Are there any public comments on items not on today's agenda? And I see something on here related to an online event that apparently happened on June 14th. Aaron, is that something you'd like to speak to?
Yeah, I'll just mention quickly that I think I forwarded this as public. There was a request that this be forwarded out to various committees and staff, and I think we didn't get it in enough time to get it to TPCC ahead of the event, and so it's here as part of the comment that we received. Just to send out to this committee, and so I think it's there just for the interest of this committee. It did relate. This event related to some discussion on parking and transportation issues, but I don't know that there's anything particularly pressing there, other than I think those conversations will continue in relation to Reserve Street and issues therein.
Thanks, Aaron. Does anyone have any comment or feedback or input on this item? And it looks like both Don MacArthur and Commissioner Josh Slotnick have joined us. We have critical mass. So are there any corrections or additions to the minutes for our April 19th meeting? Okay, seeing none, they will stand approved as presented. Any additional public comment on items not on today's agenda? Well, I will just throw in one item for anyone who's interested and looking for a good time in Billings, Montana on August 22nd and 23rd. The Big Sky Passenger Rail Authority will be hosting the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit in Billings on August 22nd and 23rd. This will be bringing together the Federal Railroad Administration, US DOT, folks from across the entire region, from Wisconsin all the way to the Pacific Northwest. If you'd like more information, and early bird registration is now open, go to gnwprs.org, gnwprs.org, as in Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit. Okay. Let's move right into our new business items today, and we will begin with a presentation from David Gray on something we've heard about in the past, and this relates to a requested change to the Sussex Avenue urban route designation between South Avenue and Brooks. David.
Good afternoon, everybody. Dave Gray, transportation planner for the MPO. I'm going to try to share my screen. Hopefully I won't have a technical glitch. Can you all see that all right?
Yes.
Excellent. So I'll be presenting on the redesignation of South Avenue between Brooks and or Sussex Avenue between Brooks and South Avenue. But the catalyst for this entire thing actually is the Sussex Bend section of those road segments. And I'll be going through the relationship that all this the section of Sussex has to the Brooks South Russell reconfiguration, the development proposal that has generated the request for the vacation of Sussex Bend, and then the redesignation options that we're going to put forward to you. So a little bit of history. In 2014, Sussex Avenue, all of these roads, Garfield, Fairview, the Sussex Bend and Sussex Avenue between Stevens and Brooks and South Avenue were all part of a mitigation project to solve the congestion and carbon monoxide hotspot that was happening at Brooks South Russell. The bend is in the red circle, and I'll zoom in here in a minute. So the area, the segment we're talking about today is between Brooks all the way to South Avenue. And this particular section, the bend, is the development, the Casa Loma proposed development has requested from the city to vacate that property so that the development can actually occur on that entire block. So far, MRA's approved $2,200,000 in TIF funding to rehabilitate that entire block. So deconstruction, removal of structures, site clearing, improvements, all of those that I have listed right there. And the development itself looks like this. So it'd take up the entire block. The bend would be gone. There are 132 housing units proposed, 1,900 square feet of commercial space. And then with the removal of the Sussex Bend, they would be putting in a new roundabout and new bike ped facilities that are adjacent. So in running the travel demand model, removing and this is a regional model. So I know I believe WGM is doing a more localized project level traffic analysis, but when I ran it through the travel demand model, it was negligible. It was merely a transfer of the traffic running through on the ramp or on the bend right around here. And it didn't look like there was any significant effect on level of service or delay, any of that. So from the modeling side of things, this is not a big deal. And I can pause anytime if you have any questions. All right, seeing none. In order for the vacation to occur, because Sussex is an urban route, the MPO needs to initiate the request to have it removed from the urban system. And then MDT, we can go all through this, but basically MDT reviews it. They secure preliminary approval from FHWA. It gets sent back to us, the MPO, for approval and a resolution. And then it goes to the Transportation Commission for approval. Once that's done, then FHWA can deal with things on their end as far as whatever kind of modifications to functional classification and urban system designations, and then everything gets updated. Now you're going to see a couple of different options for motions here. And if we go with the recommended motion, then that streamlines the process because it's an MDT removal from the urban system. It doesn't require all the FHWA approvals, and this can move faster. And I'll get into the options here in just a second. So during the June 2nd meeting at TTAC, they recommended going for option 1. These are the motion options, which would be removing Sussex Bend and transferring the classifications to Stevens Avenue between South Avenue and Sussex. And I can go back to the map if you'd like, but it's basically just moving the functional classification around through the roundabout and then leaving the rest of Sussex between Stevens and Brooks the same. That would that's option number 1, and that would require more FHWA involvement. After we, subsequent to the TTAC meeting, we had more discussion about what we can do in order just to remove the entire stretch of Sussex between South Avenue and Brooks from the urban system, and wait until the development goes in so we can better understand just exactly what kind of designations those roads are going to need, as far as Stevens around the roundabout and then Sussex out to Brooks. So our recommended motion is option number 2. And ultimately, there's going to be a system-wide assessment across the entire urbanized area that is going to look at functional classification redesignations or urban system inclusions, which we can come back and we can pinpoint also this particular area. So we're really not losing out on anything if we just remove it temporarily from the urban system and then reassess it when the system-wide MDT assessment comes through. If that, I hope that's clear. It's a little bit complicated, but I'm hoping not to make it too complicated.
Dave, can you go back to the map for just 1 second to show us the where it would go on Stevens if we were to do option 1?
Yeah, so you can see here, these are minor arterials, all of it. So basically, if we do option 1, it would be changing, just the bend would be gone, and we would be reapplying that classification and system to the stretch of Stevens between Sussex and South Avenue.
So if we don't do that, we're going to have this little orphan chunk of FHWA designation on Sussex to the west of Stevens.
We're going to no, because we'd be taking the entire stretch of Sussex off system for temporarily until the system-wide assessment comes in, which is in the near future. We can't get a more definite date than that, but typically it happens after the most recent census designates the urbanized area, and then we find out what's actually changed. So that's what predicates that system-wide assessment.
And if we we're looking for money for signalization or something of that intersection, would the removal of that designation harm us at Sussex and Brooks?
That's a good question, and maybe I could defer to either Aaron or MDT.
Hold that thought just for a second. Ryan, is from FHWA standpoint, is there anything that you would like to add into the mix here?
Sure. I mean, so the designate or the distinction that many of you may have already heard me make in the past, it's kind of a bailiwick of mine, but I like to draw a clear distinction between the urban system designation and the functional classification of any given road segment. So the former, that urban system designation, is a creation of MDTs. And so they have their own policies and procedures for establishing those designations on road segments. I won't speak to that. As for functional classification, it's not so much a matter of moving a classification. That's maybe a concept to apply to an urban route. But as far as the functional classification goes, what would happen here technically is if Sussex Bend just vanishes, goes away, obviously the functional classification would disappear along with that bend, that segment. The remaining bit of Sussex between that intersection and Brooks would continue to be a minor arterial unless and until MDT comes to us with a reclassification request. So, as David mentions, I mean, the MDT will undertake kind of system-wide functional reclassification efforts, either periodically or after censuses. I mean, so that is, I think, still on the menu here, and that would be a good opportunity to assess the system overall. But we don't have to wait for a system-wide functional reclassification effort to make functional classification changes. So, MDT could come to us with a requested functional classification change now, during, or after the vacation of Sussex. And at that point, we would just look to see how the road itself is performing, to see what the appropriate functional classification would be. In the meantime, if that, there's no rule that says there can't be, it's not wrong to think of it as kind of an orphan segment, I suppose, but there's no rule that says that we couldn't continue to have a minor arterial between, Brooks and that intersection. I'm sorry, I can't remember what the other north-south road is there.
Stevens.
Stevens, thank you. So that 2-block section of Sussex there could continue to be a minor arterial until MDT asks us to do something different with it. And again, that's just about functional classification. And then again, just to reiterate the point that the urban system designation is something that MDT, that's a process they manage, and they don't need approval from us to make urban system designation changes.
Ryan, so in terms of the proposed motions and the recommended motion before us today, thoughts on that? What best aligns with what you just said?
Well, I think David was right to say that, the one option does, anything that doesn't require that a functional classification happen now would, yes, take, some of the FHWA dependent parts of the process away. I will say that, system-wide functional classification changes, that's a lot of data to assess. That can take a while. Certainly anything that would result in an NHS change takes a long time to process, but a simple, what I would say anyway, is a relatively simple functional classification request that, just involves a few blocks here. I mean, I've turned those around in a few days before. So, I wouldn't, I guess I'll say this. So nothing that's on the screen here is wrong. I would just, my only thing to add maybe would be that I wouldn't let the FHWA related parts of the process drive your decision here. I think it's probably the case that anything that has to do with a change to the urban designation at MDT is probably something that would take more administrative time than anything to do with functional classification.
So, and before we go on for additional questions, would you, based on that, recommend striking, and I guess in either of these motions, some of the verbiage related to removal of the FHWA federal functional classification?
Well, I mean, it is a part of the process. So let me just parse the language real quick here. Give me a second. Yeah, so for option one, and shifting those designations to Stevens Avenue, I don't want to get too much into the semantics here. That's not an inaccurate way to characterize it. And I like the fact that, both the urban system and the FHWA Fed Aid functional classification, because those are two different things. So I like that they are presented separately here. As far as option two, I think that's mostly right too. I'm trying to stay away from semantical arguments. If that Sussex Bend section just goes away, it wouldn't be so much that you'd have to come to us and request that the functional classification get removed. It's just that it would vanish by virtue of the road not being there anymore. That may be the only thing I'd quibble with the way option two is worded.
Okay, thanks, Ryan. Mostly right. So
yeah. It is, yeah.
Okay, Debbie, and then I'd like to give Aaron a chance if you wanted to chime in with anything also. Debbie?
I wondered on the recommended motion number 2 about this, about including the remaining section of Sussex Avenue. I mean, why not? So you remove the bend, but why take that other piece that could just stay designated, you know, in terms of the urban system and functional classification the way it is? You know, why include that in this motion? Why not just address the bend and that's it?
Good question. Aaron?
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that and then follow up maybe with some questions for Ryan based just on process. And it's too bad we don't have someone from MDT here. But so I think with the second motion, really all we're asking is for removal of Sussex between South and Brooks from the urban system. There's really no change necessary to, as Ryan sort of outlined, to the functional classification. Because as he said, once we remove it from the urban system, we vacate the right of way, and then the Sussex Bend ceases to exist, and you have this sort of, as we've said, orphan section of minor arterial on Sussex between Stevens and Brooks at that point. So I think that maybe is a fine point of clarification for motion 2, which really all we'd be doing at that point is asking for removal of Sussex from the urban system in order to vacate the right of way. Related to whether we request the redesignate or we request the functional classification analysis and designation of Stevens in order to have the urban system go up Stevens to Sussex and out to Brooks. The reason we're not suggesting doing that now is in part due to timing, like wanting to keep this project moving reasonably quickly. And there is the component of, regardless of how fast FHWA can review the functional classification recommendation, we need to go to the Transportation Commission for the urban system removal and changes. And so we need essentially all of that done in time to sort of get on the Transportation Commission agenda. And in my conversations with MDT, it felt like that the added complication of having FHWA review the functional classification would add enough time that it would be really hard to get on the Transportation Commission agenda in August. So essentially we're right up against having to sort of squeak in on MDT's sort of timeline for getting an agenda item on the Transportation Commission for August. If we don't get on that, then we're pushed out until October. And so then, the right-of-way vacation is going to be conditioned upon getting this urban system removal. And so the city wouldn't be able to complete the right-of-way vacation until it goes through the Transportation Commission. And so then you're potentially into November and December before we can complete the right-of-way vacation, which is, a substantial amount of time. And so the purpose of our recommendation was that we can do a really quick and easy, just remove that portion from the urban system. And then we will have, the state has put their functional classification, their statewide functional classification process on hold. And so we have some opportunity to come back with that process. Or once we have the actual roundabout and the infrastructure and the development in place in say 2 or 3 years, we could come back and do the functional classification evaluation once we actually see what the impacts of all of that would be. And as Dave said with the modeling, it's probably going to show that Stevens is functioning in the same way that the Sussex Bend was, but we'd at least have the data to say that instead of modeling and assumptions and other things. And really, at the end of the day, the only thing we're losing with the urban designation removal is the ability to put federal aid towards those sections. So to Don's question about the Brooks corridor intersection, we could still, that's on a national highway. The Brooks corridor is, and so that intersection would still be federal aid eligible. It would just be primarily for something like pavement preservation funds for Sussex, but it's in reasonably good condition, I think, right now. In any case, it wouldn't rise to the top for priority, even if there were those funds available, unless we were receiving hundreds of millions of dollars of additional pavement preservation, which there's no indication that we will be. So So there's not
Aaron?
really a loss, and essentially that quick approach allows us to do a very simple action now of just removing it from the urban system, and then coming back and reevaluating the functional classification and the urban system sort of changes at a later date when we really understand what the traffic patterns are going to look like.
Aaron, so, and then Dawn here in just a minute. So based on what you just said there, is there still value to, in the recommended motion number 2, referencing the FHWA federal aid functional classification system, or just ending it at the urban system?
I think we can, and I see Ryan has his hand up. I mean, he may have more to say, or maybe correcting what I have put forward to. But I think if we're just removing it from the urban system and we're not making any functional classification changes, then I don't think we would need to reference any of that at this point. As he said, Sussex is just going to go away, and there's really nothing to get FHWA approval of in that circumstance.
So
Yeah, so
go ahead, Ryan. And
yeah,
then,
so on the contrary, Aaron, I raised my hand to affirm everything you just said. I think that is well said. And I guess the other part of that, I know, when I get a functional reclassification request, I know what it looks like when it hits my desk and how long it takes me to go through the materials and render a decision. I don't see all the things that MDT needs to do to get it to the point where I see it. And so that is an important thing to point out. And I think, Aaron, you mentioned MDT's comments about, if a federal functional classification change is necessary, then if the commission looks at that differently, if staff have to jump through, X, Y, and Z hoops because of the federal impact, then I don't want to minimize all of that. And so, right, I mean, by the time I see it, it's maybe only a few days, but that if it's that times 10x on MDT's side of the ledger just to get it to that point, then I would take MDT's advice on that, which I think is, some of the conversations we've had since the TAC meeting. I think that was the message they delivered to you, and that is, I think, a good message and something they have more insight than I do about. Just because, again, I only see it at the very end, and so MDT's advice is valid there, and I think you put it very well yourself just a few minutes ago.
Right, thanks, Ryan. Dawn.
So I guess I'm feeling like we've now gone through this pretty carefully. In my mind, I don't understand why we would need to remove the Sussex between Stevens and Brooks. And I guess my inclination is just to simply remove the Sussex Bend and then stop there. And I guess that's kind of a question, I guess, back for Aaron and Ryan. Is there anything wrong with just removing the Sussex Bend and leaving the unconnected section of Sussex between Stevens and Brooks? I mean, the reason I'm thinking that is just like, I do think that probably should be a minor arterial somehow connected through there. And it sort of just sends the message that all we did was the absolute minimum removal. We just took out the thing that was necessary to create this development pattern that we want. And we are kicking the can down the road to this future process. But, to the extent that we're sending a message to that future process, we're saying, yeah, that probably still is a minor arterial there that somehow needs to be connected.
So Dawn, before we go to Ryan and Aaron, are you suggesting why not option 1?
No, I'm suggesting restating option 2 to say submit TPCC support for the vacation of Sussex Avenue Bend, period. And removing, that road or that section of road from the urban system and the FHWA federal aid functional classification system, pending system-wide MDT evaluation. So I guess I'm just getting rid of the removal of those designations between Stevens and Brooks, leaving them in place in that area.
Right, Don. So I know, I see what you're getting at, and from a federal functional classification perspective, that's fine. There's no problem with that. again, there's no no orphan rule in
Right.
the functional classification rules. So, I mean, that is something that if you know, that there are stubs out there in the universe where, you know, functional classification just stops at some intersection, and, you know, other roads continue on from there at lower classification. So that does happen. That probably wouldn't happen in the long term. In this
Right.
case, that probably would connect one direction
Right.
or another based on traffic flow. But again, we wouldn't stop that. I mean, we would just, yeah, that stub would persist until a functional classification request comes to us. What I would caution, I guess, and you know, and I don't know how MDT feels about quote unquote orphans with respect to the urban system. So MDT might have a different opinion about having that urban system stub in a way that I don't have an issue from a functional classification stub perspective, if that makes sense.
And
But
That's the part I don't have the answer to.
Yeah, right. And maybe Aaron knows that, but just from my eyeballing of it, it looks like a minor arterial right there. And so removing it seems kind of wrong.
That's another good point, Don. I mean, because any functional, again, the Sussex Bend removal is just a fact because the road won't exist anymore. If we were to get a request to change the functional classification of the remaining part of Sussex, we would want to see justification for that change, right? So no, that is a good point, because the Sussex Bend functional classification goes away just de facto. The rest of Sussex obviously will still exist, and so if we're changing that, then we expect to see analysis to support it. So that's a really good point.
Aaron, and then Josh.
yeah, so the direction we got from MDT is that they do not want to see those kind of that orphan stub of urban system, that they want to see the connectivity of it. And so their input to us was to request removal from South Avenue to Brooks, in order to sort of shift the urban route onto Stevens. But that is sort of what we're saying is a longer process that requires more analysis and work from MDT's, and it would just push the project out by several months, potentially beyond October, depending on how long it takes MDT to do all that analysis. And I guess my perspective is there isn't really much of a loss in doing the removal now and then coming back to evaluate it sort of in the context of the whole system, either through the functional classification change. And again, I'm just talking about the urban system. The functional classification, we're not proposing any changes to that. So it will still stay classified as a minor arterial. It just won't be on the urban highway system. So it won't be sort of federal aid eligible for things like urban pavement preservation during that time that it is off the urban highway system. But my expectation is that when we do sort of a full, more broad kind of full system evaluation, and especially once we have the roundabout in place, or we've moved forward with that project, we would know that Stevens is going to function that way, and we would want to go through the getting it functioning classified, and then sort of that whole segment onto the urban system.
So Aaron,
Yeah, that's probably the way to thread. I'm sorry.
And before we go to Josh, and in the spirit of moving this along, this is a way more fascinating discussion than I had anticipated. So how about this for a paraphrase? I don't know if this will capture what you're saying, Don, or what others have said thus far, but what if option 2 read, submit TPCC support for the vacation of Sussex Bend and removing that road segment from the urban system pending system-wide MDT evaluation?
I think that's right. That's actually what I was about to say. I think that's the thread the needle here, now that we're talking through it. Because then the urban system designation will go away, which would make MDT happy for not having that stump remaining. And from our perspective, we really don't need to take action on federal classification at all right now. And that would probably avoid any kind of commission involvement and other complications from MDT's own processes. So I think that probably is the thread the needle wording here for option 2.
And just to be clear, that's removing, essentially removing Sussex, supporting the vacation of Sussex Bend and removing Sussex between South Avenue and Brooks from the urban system stop. And then we don't mention, or pending system-wide reevaluation and functional classification changes, or I mean, I don't know.
I kind of like the idea of just leaving the Fed Aid functional classification clause there in the middle completely out.
Yep.
Because again, there's nothing that I need to see about any of this for it to go forward. And we will just, clean up the functional classification at the appropriate time.
Yep.
When that time comes. So I would just maybe stay silent on that.
Yep.
Okay, Josh. Josh just made a motion, I think. Josh, we can't hear you. Oh, now you're muted. We really can't hear you. Okay, thanks anyway, Commissioner. Aaron, others, are we good with basically what Aaron just stated?
Yep, I think we strike the urban system and FHWA functional classification system from that statement.
I would entertain a motion.
So I'm still confused about that motion because what you said, Dave, sounded pretty good to me, but it also struck some language about the road between Sussex Avenue and Stevens Avenue. And I don't know if you were doing that on purpose or if you just did it shorthand.
I was doing that on purpose until I realized that Aaron had mentioned MDT's preference was to remove that entire segment from the urban system. Is that what I was hearing, Aaron, from you?
Yeah, that's the direction we have received from MDT, is that they would want to see that whole section in order just for system continuity and not having the hanging chad or orphan of urban system.
All right, I'm ready to go with that motion. Has that been made or should I make it?
I think you just did.
Okay, I made move item 2 as it's shown on the screen right now.
Okay, thanks. Is there a second? Mr. Slotnick gives it the thumbs up. Any further discussion on the motion or public comment? Seeing none, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor of Don's motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or any abstentions? Okay, that carries. Oh, good piece of work there. All right. So moving right along. Thanks, Dave, for your help on that.
Thank you all.
We have 45 minutes for 2 other somewhat meaty topics. So if I could ask the presenters to please split your time between one another here. So next up, our very own from Missoula County, Travis Ross, will be presenting the draft Missoula County Pathways and Trails Plan. So it's all yours, Travis.
All right, thank you. Afternoon, everyone. I get my screen share going here. And are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we came to you a couple months ago to give a quick rundown of this project, the Missoula County Pathways and Trails Master Plan. This was jointly funded with money from PTOL, a community development block grant, as well as the MPO. Kicked off about a year ago, and we are at the 90% draft phase, and currently going through public comment and making those final revisions before commencing down the adoption path. So wanted to share where we are with this plan thus far, in hopes of coming back to TPCC for a recommendation for approval in the planning board and the BCC. So I guess to start off, the project vision is to understand the extent of pathway and trail needs with the outside of the city of Missoula. There's been a substantial amount of planning work done within the city, and so this is really targeting more of these rural connections and needs outside of the city limits, and to also get an understanding of what an implementation of a maintenance regime would mean from a financial and practical standpoint. So our goals in this plan, you can see here, safety. So we're using existing crash data, access to destinations and recreation with an eye on equitable.
Hey, Travis, are your slides supposed to be advancing?
Yes, they are.
Am I the only one who sees a static screen?
All
No,
right.
it looks like we're looking at the screen with a couple of folks riding bikes down a path.
All right, hold on. Thank you for letting me know.
Okay.
Let's see. My apologies. I still have trouble going from Zoom to Teams back and forth. So, and I'm hitting present right now. It is not happening.
Well, if necessary, Travis, we can just look at the view right here, even though it's not presentation view.
Okay, that sounds good. So when we're talking about our this plan, we're looking at primarily shared use pathways, paved trails, not those natural surface trails, and for the most part, not sidewalks either. There are some instances where sidewalks are going to be really the most practical solution to trail needs, but primarily these are shared use paths. Going back to our plan goals, connectivity and resiliency, closing gaps in the system, and also providing for some emergency evacuation routes in high risk fire areas. We did work hard to get public outreach and feedback throughout the process, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and then an understanding of the fiscal needs and potentially environmental impacts associated with various trail projects. So for the public engagement portion of the project, let's see if I can remove these. We did two rounds of public engagement. Those each began with our stakeholder groups, and the number of you have been on that stakeholder committee or group. And then beginning with in-person meetings for the two engagement processes, we had 9 meetings, 67 attendees. Of course, that was somewhat limited given current situation with in-person meetings. We did 2 rounds of an online story map to get ideas for projects that people wanted to see, and then later tried to refine those and get some sort of quantifiable public support for the various projects. We did incorporate the MPO and city projects that have already been identified in various plans within this plan as well. When we talk about public engagement, one of our primary goals was to make sure that we had a good representation from our outlying communities. So this green bar shows the relative percentage of Missoula County residents and various communities. And so the green is, the existing proportion, and the orange is the percentage of survey respondents. So you can see we got a pretty good representation from our various rural communities in comparison with urban. We wanted to get urban, but we really wanted to target primarily these kind of the outlying communities and to balance that representation. So we also wanted to build some buy-in and trust in the process and the project, build some excitement, enthusiasm. And these are some of the takeaways that we learned through the public engagement processes, including a highlight of some of the routes that were more commonly identified in the process, Bonner Streetcar, Mullen Road Extension, etc. The priorities of the communities. We really learned some interesting, and I may have brought this up at the last presentation, but this was at Frenchtown School, and in that forum, we learned about a number of instances where kids are running across the interstate because it's hard to get from one side of Frenchtown to the other because of the interstate, as being a big gap and not a good crossing between the high school and a lot of the residents on the south side of the interstate. I already mentioned that we pulled in some data from the city and MPO and others from existing plans. This is some of the data that went into understanding the existing framework. So what barriers are there, physical barriers such as railroads, where do we have gaps in the systems, the destinations that folks are likely to go to, traffic speeds, that feeds into that safety component of the plan, in addition to the crash data. So here's an example of some of the destination mapping. So these are a lot through the Blackfoot corridor, river access, trailheads, that sort of thing. It's an example of barriers, railroad and rivers, interstates being the primary ones. Gaps, so where we have perhaps an existing system, but it doesn't provide the ideal connectivity between a couple segments. So this is Sealy Lake extending towards the Great Divide mountain bike route. And moving into kind of that desired system, like pulling this together and understanding it in a more simple way. We've broken down the trail classifications into those regional connections, north to south, east to west. Recreational connections, again, going to those identified recreational spots, and then the more local enhancements, which are providing connection from neighborhoods to the existing trail network or community resources, schools, etc. This is an overview of the proposed regional connections. The existing trail network is in solid black, and then we see the proposed connections in the dotted black. So this P2 over here, each of the trails are identified with a kind of a symbol or code, if you will. So P2 would be the road to the Buffalo, going from Johns Road to 9 Mile Prairie. Then we have up through Condon. So for each of these sections of the plan, there is a spotlight project. And it shows kind of existing conditions, an illustrative image, and a map of where the proposed project would be, and then a little bit snapshot of the information. Within, if you remember the plan goals at the beginning, safety, connectivity, access, environmental and fiscal impact, and public outreach. So those are quantified within the plan. Each project has gone through an assessment of safety enhancements and those connectivity. So there is a point allocation that was used to do this, and as you can imagine, it's kind of an iterative process. And a lot of our public comment was targeted at this particular aspect of the plan. And so the green, the darker green, is kind of the highest level, like the best, I guess, in the scale. And then you have the brown, which is kind of a moderate score, and then the lower tier is this light tan. So this is the People's Way project, heading up Evero Hill along 93 as one of the regional connections. So for recreational connections, similar approach. Let's see, that will be in this next project spotlight. So this one was the Bonner Amphitheater. There are a number of potential solutions or project implementation types, whether it be a sidewalk or a river trail or something behind this community, but or behind Bonner School. But again, these go through a review of possible points to get kind of a prioritization or just a quick snapshot. Another one is the Blue Mountain Trailhead. So that one, in anticipation of federal funding opportunities, this project, we're already using some Trails Bond funding to go ahead and complete preliminary engineering on it, or actually this one will be 100% design. This would provide a connection from the Bitterroot Trail to the Blue Mountain Trailhead. And then for the local enhancements, they are just that. So this would be the Milwaukee Trail. There's the Mullen Trail as well. So those are similar alignments, but really, if you look at them at a regional connection, that it's kind of a judgment call. But this Mullen and review provides kind of a more of a local access, if you will, more connections to the neighborhoods. Again, a spotlight project. I mentioned the issues with crossing Demere Street, I believe is the name of it, the overpass in Frenchtown. And again, we have just a kind of a description of it and its scoring. The local enhancements within the plan are broken up by quadrant of the county. So in this low target range area, there are a number of proposed projects, local enhancement projects, particularly within the target range area, connecting Fort Missoula Regional Park, Big Sky High School, Big Sky Park, and then 3rd, 7th, Spurgeon, South Avenue as well. Here's one of the project highlights within that section of the county. This is going from 3rd Street to Fort Missoula Regional Park by way of Tower Street, Big Sky Park. You can see the assessment on here in terms of particularly with safety and connectivity and access. Local enhancements in the eastern, southeastern region of the county. Potomac, I believe this was Swanson Lane, kind of connecting that community more. This is arguably, it could be a regional connection as well. I think it's classified as a local enhancement just because it does connect the community in Clinton, and there's an existing trail already in place. But yeah, arguably this would be a regional connection as well. This was another area of the county that we learned that the school, there's no trail through Clinton. The school has track practice. The kids are running on Mullen Road. While we were out a couple of weeks ago, folks, there was someone in a walker pushing it, or in the walker down Mullen Road, along with someone else with a stroller. So there's some real needs out here for some trails. Another project this is that particular project I was telling you about in Clinton. The Piltsville Trail Extension currently goes and ends in Tura. In the northern area of the county, we heard a lot of comments actually about a trail around Sealy Lake. That's something that the community would like to see. And this is another project, which is a wayfinding project to improve signage, crossing, safety, that sort of thing. It has it's less expensive, doesn't have a lot of environmental impact, so it gets a higher score in that way, but kind of fleshed out in that moderate range on the other criteria. In terms of implementation, looking first at the capital costs for building these trails, we have a limited amount left in trails bond funding. I think it's hovering around 3 million now, and you can see what these projects cost. And this is just a general kind of snapshot of what projected costs would be, broken down by the types of projects. So in a rural paved unconstrained situation, easy right of way, no significant geotechnical barriers, 634,000 per mile. These constrained may have that tight I guess scenario of geotechnical, or maybe a stream that's nearby. Those prices are almost double, or more than double. This is akin to what we would see probably in the Highway 200 or Bonner streetcar, that kind of constricted area, or along the 93 trail, the Bitterroot Trail to Lolo. Saw some higher per mile cost. And then this, again, urban paved, expensive as well. This buffered shoulder, we didn't see a lot of those as recommendations in the plan, but it is there. Sometimes that's just the best or only practical solution. And 502,000 per mile. WGM worked on this aspect of the plan. And I guess I should back up. The consultant was Design Workshop that led the project. WGM completed this kind of implementation chapter of the plan. So one of the comments that we heard is looking for an unpaved option on trails. The project is focused on the paved shared use trails, but just like in Buffered Shoulder, there may be aspects or particular projects that are more suitable for an unpaved surface. In terms of funding for these, for the actual construction, these are the typical wells that we would look to get these projects going. Including the Recreational Trails program is one that's commonly used over here, at least, and CMAC, FLAP. Then looking at funding that is outside of grant sources, partner funding. So for example, if MDT or an association, we have like the Grant Creek Trails Association, Butler Creek Trails Association, able to bring some funding, or a county-wide trails RSID, for example. Impact fees, we're looking at that, and new development, TIFs, and then private development driven. So getting it through subdivision as a condition on subdivision primarily. And moving on to the maintenance aspect of it. You can't really see this here. Sorry, I'm having so much trouble with PowerPoint today. But these kind of more frequent maintenance activities are here on the left, and then preventative maintenance, which is also very important, here on the right. an approximation for this number is 8,500 to 11,000 per mile per year. So looking at our existing system, this, in terms of the cash that's spent on the maintenance activities, we're at about $10,000. That doesn't include some of the partner tasks that are getting taken care of, like MDT does. We do have maintenance agreements on a couple of trails that are in MDT right of way, when they do a repaving or resurfacing, they'll also do the trail work. So that's not accounted for in there. And additionally, Missoula County Public Works has picked up a significant amount of the trail maintenance over the last year, purchased a couple pieces of equipment that's really helping us get a lot more bang for the buck on trail maintenance. But utilizing these calculations developed by WGM and then projecting that out to the approximately 41 miles of trail, this is what expected cost would be. So taking all of that and moving forward and how we can use this plan or hope to use this plan, modifying regulations. I mentioned the subdivision regulations and kind of incorporating this trails plan. We hope to get it adopted as an issue plan within the growth policy to assist with getting these trail projects built on the ground as development occurs. The funding and implementation of projects is another one. We're using Trails Bond money to develop 3 projects right now, a feasibility assessment at the pinch point on Bonner Streetcar, a Mullen Trail extension through Frenchtown, as well as the Blue Mountain project that I mentioned. And Cody to Deschamps Lane as well. So 4 projects that we're trying to get teed up and ready for grants. And then maintaining the pathway and trail system, so it will get the most years out of it. So that's the gist of the plan. We're pretty excited about it, and are hoping to start moving it through adoption process in the next couple of months. It's busy meeting schedule in July. So probably pick that back up in August and come back to BCC for consideration of a recommendation for adoption. Just working out that final 10% of incorporating public comment and any other edits.
Thanks, Travis.
So yeah, with that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So we have time for just a few questions before we need to move on to our final presentation today. Merita, I know you have to leave early. Do you have any questions? Other than the fact of you're probably wondering why Missoula County is spending way more than necessary for maintenance on all of these trails. So
I don't have any questions, but this is really exciting and a good way to connect and extend our systems. So I appreciate it and look forward to the final product.
Yes, we're excited too. Thank you.
others. Okay, well, this is not the last that you've seen of it. We'll have more time to digest this and we'll be back as part of the formal adoption process. So thanks, Travis.
All right, thank you.
All right, rounding out today, it looks like John and Aaron, you're going to talk to us about electric vehicle infrastructure deployment plan for the state of Montana.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. John Sand here, Transportation Planner with the MPO. Thank you for your time this afternoon. Are you able to see the PDF okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, I'm here to talk about the Nevi formula program, which stands for the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula. So really exciting program that we get to look forward to coming up. I'm going to give you a timeline just in a moment. But today, like I said, review of the EV and charging infrastructure program and how it's related to the IIJA Act, and then more specifically the Nevi program and its project eligibility requirements. And then I want to let you know about the state of Montana DEQ survey that's available. And then the goals for today, I'll be quick through this presentation, but we are drafting a letter that is in the attached to the agenda today. So I hope if you haven't gotten a chance to look at that, please look at that. And we want to include any comments or questions this committee has before the June 30th deadline. So just to make sure we're all on the same page about what we're talking about with EV terms, there's 3 different types of EVs. So battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and then straight up hybrid vehicles. So today we're talking about the BEVs and PHEVs that you can actually plug in.
John, it looks like you've frozen up on us. Aaron, are you within a stone's throw of John?
No, he's working remotely today. But
you have the ability to share this presentation, Aaron, and
maybe let me see if I can pull up some slides. I don't actually have them on hand, but I can certainly look for them. And maybe, well, since we're running short on time, maybe I'll just put it this way. Oh, there's John is back. I won't put it that way. I'll let John keep going.
What did you say?
I didn't say that. I just mumbled for a little bit until you got back on, John. So
yeah, it kicked me out of Zoom. Sorry about that. Can you see the 3 different station levels? Okay, yeah. Cool. So just to make sure we're on the same page about this too, the Nevi program is, so this pot of money is requiring level 3 DC fasting. So it's a lot quicker, 60 to 80 minutes. And then the CCS combo is the universal charging component that will be required for this. And so Tesla users have an adapter to work with these CCS combos. So just want to address the Tesla concern or users out there. So just a few details about the IIJA Act is currently there's $7.5 billion for EV charging stations. There's $2.5 allocated for discretionary grant programs. And this committee will be having future conversations about a community or regional charging grant program that we'd like to talk about more in the future. The statewide deployment plan is the $5 billion available over the next 5 years. Montana is going to receive $43 million of that to support a convenient, affordable, and reliable, equitable national EV charging network. And then we'll get more into the corridors here in a minute. I got some maps for you. So the timeline for the Nevi program is Montana DEQ and is working with MDT to develop a plan that must be submitted by the 1st of August. FHA will review this and provide any guidance if needed by September 30th. And once that's done, then the distribution of Nevi formula funds can begin. So currently these are the FHWA pending corridors. So Highway 2 in the north, 90 in the south, 93, 15, and then 94 out to Glendive. So one of the things that they are looking for feedback is what additional corridors we would like to see designated. So you can check out in the letter, we included Highway 83, Highway 12, Highway 200, and I think that's it. So just something to keep in mind while we're looking at these corridors. Through Missoula specifically, we have created this buffer I'll get into more details, but there's a 1 mile requirement from the corridor. So with the currently designated corridors, we cover a significant part of Missoula. Highway 12 / Brooks is highlighted there in purple. So you can imagine if that was a designated corridor and we drew a mile buffer on that, big part of the city's included. So that's exciting to see. As a MPO, we work closely with the city and county and state. And so just for some things for this committee to consider is that community or regional plan I mentioned, and then designating additional alternative fuel corridors. And then whether it's a local plan or the statewide plan where we want to utilize locations for recreation and tourism and job opportunities. And then there's also been some local conversation between the city and county about local fleet conversion. So how this, whether it's the Nevi program or the community-wide or regional program, how that could dovetail with city and county vehicle fleet, electric fleet conversion. So just some quick overview of these Nevi requirements. Each charging station is going to require 150 kilowatt of power, and that's so that you can achieve the level 3 charging. So it'll be a lot quicker and convenient for users driving across the country or across the state. The CCS plugs I mentioned, and then 4 chargers will be required at each location, so 4 vehicles can be charged simultaneously. The locations need to be publicly available 24/7, no further than 50 miles apart, and then, as I mentioned, 1 mile of the travel corridor and a 1/4 mile of amenities. And amenities is another item that they're looking for feedback on, what amenities are different to each community. And then operation achieving a reliability of 97% or above, and they need to be maintained and operated in the same location for no less than 5 years. Some interesting project eligibility I wanted to let this committee know about is it could be used for existing EV charging infrastructure upgrades, traffic control devices such as wayfinding, data sharing for performance measures, and mapping analysis to look at commuting and travel patterns. Some other notes I want to mention: this supports the administration's Justice 40 initiative. This program does require 20% match. Renewable energy, this is a big question that has been coming up. Renewable energy generation and storage can be considered eligible costs if it leads to overall construction and operation costs. And then FHWA anticipates most states will contract with private entities for installation, operation, and maintenance. So we have 12 minutes here to have a quick question and discussion. These were the items I pulled out of the survey that we could have a discussion about. There's also the online survey that is attached in the agenda today. So you can take that as an individual or representing an agency or group. But as I mentioned, we have that draft letter that we are hoping to get support from this committee so we can get that submitted by the end of next week.
Thanks, John. Looks like we've lost a few folks, but for those of us who've stuck it out, questions, comments, I guess I'll start by just saying I'm fully supportive of rolling in Highway 83 and Highway 200 into the mix from Missoula County standpoint. Other thoughts from folks?
Well, while everyone's thinking, I'll just throw out there that these are comments primarily on the state's deployment plan, and there is dedicated formula funding for that, but there is also a national discretionary grant program, as John mentioned, that we can apply for funding directly as a city or county or maybe even as an MPO. And so there's some opportunity to do our own implementation of EV infrastructure, and we don't know exactly what that program is going to look like yet, but One thought that and some discussion that we've been having with city and county staff and others is the need for a local deployment plan. So we really understand sort of the infrastructure needs that we have on electric vehicles. Where do we want to put them? Sort of what are our own priorities? What are, how do we manage these kinds of investments? Are they going to be privately owned? Are they going to be publicly owned and privately maintained? There's just a lot of details, and it seems like every conversation something else comes up. And so what I'm hoping to bring forward next month, and would be really interested in feedback from this committee, is the extent to which the MPO can help facilitate doing more localized, whether it's contributing to a county-wide deployment plan or sort of an urban area deployment plan. I think to the extent that we're all coordinated across all the various players in Missoula on how we want to start rolling this out and all the challenges and opportunities we have would be beneficial. So something that
Aaron, are you suggesting using PL dollars for that?
Yeah, I am suggesting that that's an opportunity that we have. And so we'll have that discussion next month and in August when we look at our next year's work program. But just something to think about, who needs to be involved in that? Who else could contribute to a plan like that? And making sure that we have, one, the right scope for that project, and two, enough project partners so that it's not all on the MPO's shoulders to fund that.
Great, thanks. Questions, comments from folks? All right. We'll take a look at the letter if folks have not already, and please pass on to Aaron or John any additional comments that you might have. All right. Thanks, John. And I guess before we leave, Aaron, is there any update as far as when we might move back to in-person or hybrid meetings?
Yeah, next month. So our next meeting in July, and so we'll have details about that. I'll work with actually on what that looks like and where we'll be meeting, and make sure that there are good instructions. But we'll try to find a big enough meeting room, and it will just be committee members and staff meeting in person. That we aren't going to sort of full public hybrid meetings quite yet. That'll happen in the next month or two. So.
Okay.
To be announced.
Great. Any last final thoughts from anyone? Okay. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.
Yep.
We'll be adjourned.
Thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.